Reactive abuse is one of the most confusing terms that you'll ever hear in the domestic violence space. Some people think that it refers to the perpetrator, right? His abuse that makes the victim react. But that's not what it means. And honestly, the name itself is part of the problem. The actual definition has always been about the victim. It's your reaction when you've been pushed too far. It describes how you can appear to be the abusive one when really you were reacting to abuse. That's why I don't call it reactive abuse at all anymore. I call it a reactive response. And I don't say that like I coined the term. The first I'd personally heard that term used, reactive response, was on btr.org. Now, abuse is really about intention and control. So a reaction under pressure isn't abuse. It's survival. It's a response, a normal response to being mistreated. And other experts back this up. According to Very Well Mind, reactive abuse happens when someone who's been abused lashes out in verbal or physical ways, and then abusers use that against the victim to claim that she's abusive. The Greene County Family Justice Center explains that victims often question themselves after these reactions, right? They wonder if they're just as bad as their abuser, exactly how their abuser wants them to feel. Other advocates like Flying Free even suggest that reactive defense is a better name. Some people even call it self-defense, but labeling it wrongly shifts the blame onto the victim. The National Domestic Violence Hotline points out the exact same thing. Abusers twist these reactions to make it look like mutual abuse, when in reality, the power and control imbalance has never changed. And as a quick aside, mutual abuse doesn't exist. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this is part 7 of my series, The 8 Types of Abuse. We've already covered physical and sexual, psychological, verbal, financial, and post-separation abuse, but today we are talking about one of the most misunderstood parts of the cycle, reactive responses. And if you've ever yelled or slammed a door and said something cruel that you regret, or you've ever thrown something in the middle of an argument, I've done that. I need you to hear this. That moment doesn't make you the abuser. I'm Lisa Sonni. I'm a toxic and abusive relationship expert. I'm an author and certified coach. I help women break trauma bonds, leave abusive men, and rebuild their lives. And this episode, it's going to be uncomfortable because we're going to talk about the moments that you might not even want to admit to yourself. But by the end, I want you to understand what's really happening and why your reaction was never the same thing as his abuse. They're so good at convincing you that you're the problem. Subscribe now so you don't miss the final video in the series where we cover religious and spiritual abuse, which is one of the most insidious and rarely named types. But let's start here. Abuse really isn't about who yells louder. Abuse is about intent, control, and a consistent pattern of power over someone else. So when you finally yell, when you finally snap, that doesn't erase the months or years of him pushing you to that breaking point. And make no mistake, abusers engineer these situations, right? They want you to break. They know exactly what buttons to press. They know how long to withhold, what lie to repeat, and when to needle you until you explode. And then they stand back, right? Arms folded, calm as ever. And they're like, see, you're the crazy one. That's the setup. And they're often recording that moment. Not always, but that's a real trap. Now, some people call this crazy making, but here's how this plays out in real life, okay? He follows you from room to room when you're begging for space or you're begging him to stop until you finally scream to get him out. He pokes and pokes with insults. You're lazy, you're worthless, you're pathetic, until you throw something just to make it stop. He lies with a straight face. I never said that. You imagined it. You're so paranoid. You know that it's false, but he won't budge, and that fury and rage builds until it just flies out. He insults you in front of friends, knowing that you don't want to cause a scene. And then he whispers something so cruel that you snap publicly, and then you look like the problem. Or he stonewalls you, right? Sitting in silence, sits there for hours. He refuses to answer you. Eventually, your nervous system can't take it, and you lash out. And I know from the outside, right? It looks like you are the aggressor. And inside, it feels like you've been held hostage in this no-win trap. Your back pressed against a wall. Your body could not hold the pressure anymore. It is like a pressure cooker. This is where the nervous system piece matters so much. When you are under threat, your body has 4 survival responses, right? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Most women in abusive relationships actually live in freeze and fawn. You shut down, you appease, you avoid, but sometimes your system flips to fight. That's the moment you yell, you slam a door, you snap. And it's not because you chose to be abusive. It's because your nervous system is screaming, enough. And here's the part men and women do not like to face. There are women in prison right now for killing their husbands after years of abuse, emotional, psychological, physical, all of it, because they saw no other way out. Women in abusive relationships are trapped in ways that men just aren't. Research shows that the vast majority of women that are incarcerated for killing a male partner had been abused by him first. Some had even reported it and they were just ignored. So others stayed silent because they knew nothing would change. And like, hello, we live in a world where there are little to no consequences for abusive men, even when there's proof. So when these women finally fought back, the system called it murder, not self-defense. That's how misunderstood reactive responses are. They can push women to the absolute edge and then punish them for surviving. And listen, I'm not saying that women can't be abusive too, so don't willfully misunderstand what I'm saying. Don't misunderstand the point that I'm making. While women can be abusive too, it doesn't change the fact that the majority of women in prison for murder, they murdered the perpetrator of their abuse. And I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's a good reaction or that it's okay or an appropriate thing to do. Do I really have to say that murder is wrong? I probably do, don't I? This is the internet, after all. Murder is wrong. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but do you ever find it interesting that if a woman cheats on a man and then he beats her, or a woman simply tries to peacefully divorce her abusive husband and he kills her, for example, so many people will say, what did she expect? Or show understanding of his reaction, right? They make jokes about her taking half, but when a woman murders her perpetrator of abuse, suddenly there is absolutely nothing that could justify it. Just absolutely nothing. It's wrong, period. I'm just saying, okay? Men talk all day long about how women provoke them, but apparently men can't provoke women. That's unfair. You've taken it too far, Lisa. Here is the tragic part of these responses. Outside of women who were defending themselves landing in jail, that fight response is the one that he's waiting for. That's why he records it on his phone, right? He tells your friend, see, she's unstable. He tells the kids, mommy has anger problems. He tells your therapist or the mediator, I just don't know what to do with her temper. And because these outsiders only see the explosion, not months of provocation, you get painted as the problem. And professionals fall for this trap too, right? Therapists, mediators, judges, they see your outburst, but they don't see the context. They call it mutual conflict. In fact, in so many cases, right, they might see the symptom, the reaction, and they're not even interested in the context or what happened. Now that makes you doubt yourself even more when really they're just missing the setup that he engineered. Now, I really want you to understand where the term reactive abuse even came from. In domestic violence advocacy, people actually noticed how survivors were being blamed for their own reactions, and they coined the term to describe it. But I think here's the mistake. Putting the word abuse in the name made it sound like the victim was guilty of abuse too, which only made the shame worse. And that's why I don't use it anymore. I call it a reactive response. I have old videos, me talking about reactive abuse, but I stopped because language matters. And here's what that shame really feels like, right? You finally collapse on the couch after one of those fights and you think, oh my God, I sounded just like him. Or oh, I can't believe I threw that. Or maybe I'm the toxic one. And that shame is so friggin' heavy. It actually deepens the trauma bond because the only person that sees that side of you is him. So you feel complicit in your own abuse. And so many women feel that shame for years, convinced that their one reaction somehow cancels out all of his ongoing cruelty. But I want to be clear that your reaction doesn't erase his abuse. Your explosion doesn't make you the abuser. It actually proves just how far he pushed you. But society loves to minimize this, and they love to blame women by saying, well, you both said things, or It takes two. And that's the kind of sloppy, false equivalence, both sides thinking garbage that keeps women silent. Because yeah, you both said things. That's true. But only one of you was saying it as a tactic of control. The other was reacting in desperation. And that's not the same thing. And also, this is actually where his performance comes in, right? Who is the best at playing the victim? The perpetrator. He says that he reacted to you. You'll say that you reacted to him, and then you're confused, right? His reaction is either that he's doing this on purpose to get your reaction and that he's entitled to treat you this way, but you're not entitled to react. How dare you, right? Some of these men, they know how to stay calm on purpose. Calm is a weapon. He knows how to keep his voice low, to stand there very calm, very chill, makes you look like the irrational one. His calmness isn't self-control. It's part of the act. He wants you flailing and screaming so that he looks reasonable. And the double standard is brutal. When he yells, it's anger. When you yell, it's abuse. When he screams, people just, oh, he lost his temper. But when you scream, you're the problem. And let's talk about the man behind this for a minute, right? He's not surprised when you snap because he engineered it. He manufactured it. That's one of the biggest points that I'm making here, right? You understand this. He wants you off balance so he can feel in control. He wants the recording. He wants the proof, the story to tell. And he wants the shame to sink into you. Shame is like the glue that holds all of this together. The more ashamed you feel, the less likely you are to tell anyone what's happening. He knows this, and that's why he keeps doing it. People around you are going to be like, well, you both treated each other badly. You know, I've seen both. But what they saw is reactive abuse. They saw your response. Now, some lesser known setups look like this. He deliberately mispronounces your name or he mocks your background and it antagonizes you until you explode. He touches you in a way that he knows you hate over and over until you shove him away. And then he's like, see, you're so violent. He pretends not to understand simple requests. He'll be like, I don't get it until you yell. Or he accuses you of cheating with this little smirk night after night until finally you scream, shut up. Then he calmly says, why are you so defensive if you've got nothing to hide? Those are traps. They're not accidents. So let's put this in perspective. Abuse really isn't about isolated incidents. It's about a consistent pattern of power and control. A reactive response is a symptom of being abused. It's not evidence that you're abusive. The shame that you feel for how you reacted isn't your shame. So if you're sitting here thinking about the worst thing you ever did, the cruelest thing you ever did in the relationship, I know that horrible sick feeling in your stomach. I felt it too. But I want you to hear me. That moment does not define you. It was a nervous system pushed to the breaking point by an abusive man who wanted you to break. And that's why when women leave, you notice that those reactions stop. You notice that you never had those reactions in previous relationships. And trust me when I say, I know he's telling you that this is the only relationship that he's ever been in with these kinds of reactions. But just because he said that doesn't make it true. These men have patterns of this happening in so many relationships. You know that you don't. And that's the point. It doesn't happen for you anymore because the pressure cooker isn't there anymore and the fight response doesn't get triggered. That alone proves that it was never your nature. It was the abuse. This was part 7 of the 8 types of abuse. In part 8, we're covering religious and spiritual abuse and how men twist scripture and faith and morality into weapons of control. That video is really going to challenge a lot of people, but it needs to be said. So if this resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss it and share this video and comment because someone who needs to hear that their worst moment does not erase the truth could watch this video. They need to know they were abused.